A new man was put in, and he didn't like me. I don't know how many other women he didn't like. There was 13 of us, the first women among 400 men to be hired in there. And but he didn't like me. That was for sure. He was from England, but he was a naturalized citizen. And funny stuff started happening. Well, and then they made me forelady because my the boss we had, Mr. Brown, he started playing with one of the girls. With her bust at the table and everything. And the high top people didn't like that, so they put me in charge. And one reason was I could read blueprints. Most of the women that they were hired that day couldn't read a blueprint.
Right.
And so I was very careful about what the blueprint said and how we did the work. Until one day the welder came in there and he was mad. He said, if I ever find out which one of you told the FBI what's going on here, I'm going to kill you. And then I learned that what they had been doing, see, we made parts for the Navy and parts for the airlines. And they were welding things in such a way that the plane would break. The plane wouldn't be useful very long. And then I also learned after a while that uh, they had employed a special agent in there. Only nobody's supposed to know that he was a special agent. He was trying to figure out who was behind all this sabotage. So finally, he was there 4 months. He didn't want to blow his cover, so he quit. So they wouldn't find out that he was in there. And they still didn't know who was behind it. And someone had made the remark among us women there that how about this new personnel man from England, because he hated the Japanese, but he thought the Germans were wonderful. He said, there's something wrong there someplace. And we had one lady who was of German descent. Her machine was always breaking down. Always. Every day. They fixed it and it broke down again. And we finally figured it was done on purpose. So one day, this one girl who was working on airplane parts, I come in, checked on her parts, and she had $1,300 worth done already, all below specification of the blueprint. I said, we can't use those. They're a waste now. So I went to Mr. Brown and I told him, I said, the girl just ruined $1,300 worth of material there. I said, we can't use them. He looked at me and he says, I'm still the boss, regardless if you're the forelady. But I'm still the boss, and I told her to do it that way. And it still didn't sink into me. And then one day they said we were supposed to do some nuts and bolts. When I say nuts, they were about this square, about 4 inches square. Supposed to smooth them out and make them shine. And again, they were below specification. We got them right from the lathe, and I told the inspector, I said, we can't touch those because then they're no use to anybody. So he looked at it and looked at it and measured it, and finally he's told me to touch up a little of the rough spots, but no more. And he said, now I'll buy them. And Mr. Brown was in the office, and he came back and he says, okay, Miss Winter, you won again, but this is the last time you ever win. And I made a very dumb statement. I did not know who was behind the whole thing. But I remember saying to him, when he had told me that I know who's behind it. I know all about it now, and I can name the person. And he just looked at me and went in the office, and 5 minutes later he come back and says, "Get out of this building, you're fired. You're a troublemaker." Oh, then I knew he was behind it. I didn't know then.
Wow.
So I went directly to the FBI and talked to them. And then at that time you were frozen to your jobs. The only ones you weren't frozen to was waitress or sales clerk. The other jobs, all defense clients, you were frozen. I had to get a release in order to work for Douglas. Douglas was going to hire me right away, but I couldn't even work at Douglas until I got a release there. So I went back there, and it must have been the fifth or sixth day, and I went back there and told them I want my release so I can work at Douglas. And this personnel man told me, he says, "We can't allow that. You're a troublemaker. And we cannot allow troublemakers to go someplace else and cause problems." I says, "Fine." I said, "You're in hot water up to here. And I'm walking out of here." He yelled for the girl to give him my release papers. I went to work for Douglas, and I worked there until my dad died. So I left there before the war ended. And I worked, well, first I worked in a department where I did nothing but sanding, which is a very boresome work. And then I worked on what we call the stamping machine, which is not a little machine. It's a huge thing as high as this building, a room. And you pull the lever down, it stamps out metal. I worked on that. Then I was transferred to another department because wages were also frozen. You could only go so high, and then you had to either go to another line of work or another department to get higher wages. So I was put in another department, and the foreman there, he didn't like any women to begin with. Not any woman. And they had several women in there. But he thought it was a disgrace to have women do a man's job. One of them was a school teacher, mathematics high school teacher, and she was good at it. And now I probably couldn't do it, but at that time you had to know how to do geometry to work some of the things. So anytime he had a problem, everybody would yell, "Well, go ask Mary. She knows the answer." Oh, that would make him mad. So he took all my work away. When my shift come on, took everything away, and then he turned me in and said I refused to work.
Mm.
Well, I was not a union member, but the union was behind me. They said they don't know why this man stays in charge because he has caused so many problems. I mean, not with non-union members, but also with union members. And he did a lot of things, him and another guy. Actually, they were stealing government property, making things out of that and then selling it. Well, he didn't get caught, but the other guy got caught.
Mm.
And so when they talked to me in the office, next thing I knew, I was notified that I worked with the liaison engineers. That made him mad, too, because he didn't think a woman should be put in that position. I worked there until I quit the liaison engineers.
So how many total years did you work at Douglas?
At Douglas, I worked almost 3 years.
And then how many years at the other place?
Huh?
Wasn't there two places?
Yeah, that was, I don't remember the name of the first place I worked. The first place we made parts for the Navy and the airline. That is warships.
Right.
At Douglas, at El Segundo where I worked, mostly planes we worked on, no ships. We made the SBD, but before I left there, they were obsolete. They had a better plane.
Right.
These were one-seater planes that we worked on. I worked there before I was putting the lamps in the engineers department on these motor mounts. Huge things. They looked like this. And I had to make sure that uh, all the measurements were right on top and the bottom to fit in. They were called motor mounts to hold the motor, I guess. They were one engine planes. It was a boring job. Oh, that was a boring job. You had to sit there after you had one of them lined up about a half hour just watching it that everything goes right. Sitting there half an hour just watching it. That was boring.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, Grandma. I think I'm gonna quit for today.
That's it?
Yeah. And next time you come, I'm gonna videotape more.
I don't know. I've been contemplating whether I want to come anymore.
Oh, come.